Okay, so it's time to go over the settings window in Logic Pro X. Let's open up the settings by going to Logic Pro X, Preferences and General. Let's start with the first General tab here. The first one is called Project Handling. And the first setting that you have here is the startup action. And it says, defines what happens when Logic Pro X is opened. So for now, we have the setting on Open Most Recent Project. So let's say that I'm working on a project and then I'm quitting Logic Pro X and then I'm opening up Logic Pro X. It's going to load up that project again. So I have this setting on a different setting. So I always have it on Create New Project using default templates. And I will explain why. You can always have it on Do Nothing, and that basically does nothing. So when you open up Logic, you're just getting this here. So you can choose if you want to open a recent project or creating a new or whatever you want to do. I always have a template where I put in my default settings that I want to have. So let's say that I'm always using some kind of FXs in my master, like the stereo out. I always use some compressors or some EQs maybe. Then I save it as a preset, and I always load that preset when I open up Logic. So let's say that I quit Logic, I have been working on a big project, and then I just want to go back to that project. So when I open up Logic and I have this setting on, then I'm going to have the default template open up every time. But that's fine. I can just go to File and open Recent. So here's the default template that you can choose. So it says, allows you to choose a default template when Create New Project using default template is chosen from the Startup Action pop-up menu. So you can just go ahead and select template here, and you can create a new template from here. And creating a template is as easy as making a new project and just pressing here, empty project, and you will have an empty project opening up. Here it says auto backup, defines the number of alternatives that are saved as part of the project. So you can have a lot of different backups here, but just be careful with this because your project size can be very big if you have it on this setting or even on this setting here. Recent items defines how many recently opened projects are displayed in File Recent Items. So this just defined this Open Recent menu here. Next one, editing. Number of undo steps, 100. And this is just the edit and undo history. You can have a lot of different stuff here if you have been working on your project. So let's say that you have been working on a project a lot and then you just want to undo a lot of different steps. You can just go to the undo history and you can even see by time. So let's say that you screwed up something in your project and you know that, all right, for like 15 minutes ago I had a very good idea. Then you can watch the time here and go back to that step. And I will not really explain exactly every setting here. I will just briefly go over them, what I say in this little text box here, but I will explain the settings that I seem being very very important for you to know about. So this setting, when selected, adds a description of the edit operation, cutting for example, to the name of the region or resulting regions. Editing an original region also alters any quantization template derived from that region. So I will not go over all of the settings here. I'm just going to go over the settings that I see is very important for you to know, and the settings I use all the time. All of the other settings, you can just go ahead and read on them. You can have this quick help button here and just hover over the different settings here, because a lot of these settings are just like preferable stuff, and they're making more sense when you're working on a big project. So for here, I would say number of the undo steps, they are very important. The rest are just basically good at the default setting. Same here, this should be off. Same thing here. This is just how Logic should react, and it will be strange if you turn these off. But there are some reasons that you want to turn off them for. Okay, so this is a very important setting. Core audio should always be enabled, otherwise you won't hear any sound to your speakers. Then you have output device. This should be set to your sound card or built-in output if you're using your computer's built-in sound card. You can also choose system setting, and if you have it on system setting, then if you're changing sound card, then Logic will change that too. So let's say that you're working with a MacBook, then you want to have this on system setting, because if you're working in your studio, this will change automatically. And then if you go away from your studio, this will change to your computer's sound card. Input device. This should always be your sound card or your microphone if you're using that. The I/O buffer size. This is very important for, it determines the size of the buffer used by the audio hardware for both input and output. So if you hear a lot of pops or cracks when you're playing something in Logic, then you should make this higher. And what happens if you're making this amount higher is just that Logic will take just a few milliseconds longer to load up the project, or if you're pressing play or pause, it may be not so quick. But if you're having it on this setting, this will be very, very quick. But you can instead hear some pops or cracks. And this is just because the CPU has much fewer milliseconds to work if you have it on this setting. And also you will have some MIDI delay if you have it on a high amount. And you can see it here, resulting latency. So if I have it on a lower number here, I will just get 5 milliseconds of round trip. If I press the MIDI keyboard, I will have sound immediately, or almost immediately. 5 milliseconds is very little. If I go here, I will have 50 milliseconds, which will make a bit of a delay. And if you want to play some smooth piano chords, for instance, then this could be disturbing. But on the other hand, the project will be a lot smoother, and you will not have so many pops or cracks or strange sounds when you're playing a big project. But I would say have it on this setting, and if you're getting any problems with your projects, it starts to make some different strange sounds, then you can go here and make this amount higher. So all of this should be in their default setting here. Let's go to general. Same thing here, basically. Everything should be as it is, and this is very good settings, so you don't need to bother with these settings. So as you can see, there's a lot of different advanced settings here. If you're exporting into MP3 files, you can make this amount higher to 320 kbps. It's a lot better than the suggested 192. This recording file type, this is the file type that your files will get if you're doing some recordings in Logic. And AIFF, this is Apple's own audio file. You can of course just use WAV. Here you can define the language of Logic. And here is just some different graphical aspects of Logic. You can have this workspace area background in dark or bright, or even a custom color. Or it's just if you want it dark or how much lighter you want to. You can also put some grid lines here if you want to. This setting here, shaded loops, is very great to have. I would suggest you to have this enabled. I will show you what difference this does. So let's say that you have a MIDI region here and you loop it. Now you see all of your MIDI regions that are looped are getting a different, more darker color here. And you can now see the difference between them. If you're not having this on, it's very hard to tell if this is a loop or if this is the actual MIDI region. I would rather not change anything here too. If you open up Piano Roll, you will see that Piano Roll has dark background. You can change that to bright background. I always have this enabled too. This is if you're using Score. And you can change a lot of things here. If you're doing movies with Logic, here are your settings for that. Automation, same thing here. This should be as in the default settings here. If you're encountering any problems with automation or any other section from this setting here, you can go on to here, as I said, put out this quick help button and just look through the settings and see if it does something about the problem. So here will be the list of all of your MIDI controllers if you have any. So let's say that you have any MIDI controller with USB, for instance, a MIDI keyboard, then you will have the list of the MIDI keyboard here. It should install automatically, so you really don't need to see it even here, but Logic should detect it here. Here you can define the composer name, artist name, album name, and iTunes playlist. This would be copied. This info would be copied in every bounce you make with Logic. So you don't have to define it every time when you're making bounce or exports from Logic Pro X. This is the advanced settings, and you should have everything enabled here to get the most from Logic.